94.3 Royal FM.
Welcome to Tuesday Conversations. It's 27 minutes now to 9 o'clock. Ephraim Ramwenge is in the studios already. We are continuing on our series of strategic planning. Everyone needs a plan. Matter of fact, if you are a Christian, the Bible says that planning is yours, but fulfillment belongs to the Lord. Meaning there must be a plan that God works with. If you have none, you've given nothing to God to work with. Wait for a miracle.
Have you
if
thought
you
of
believe in miracles.
Have you thought of being a pastor in the other life when this one is done?
No.
I have thought about it the
Yeah.
minute all options of making money are gone.
You'll be a pastor.
Have you heard Jesse on a Sunday? Have you heard Jesse on a Sunday?
I have on his show on a Sunday.
He's
like,
there preaching. I'm like,
looks like
pastor.
a church is here. It has arrived with the Holy Spirit. First of all, how have we all chosen not to wear white?
I mean, I woke up.
See how the
before
Holy
you
Spirit
guys.
works?
I woke up before you guys. So
We
I
have
don't
all
know.
chosen to be in white.
I-
T-shirts, moreover.
Properly. It's a Friday. It's
No.
almost. It's almost
It's
weekend.
almost Friday.
So Tuesday is the new Friday.
It's almost weekend.
It is what it is.
Ephraim, how are you?
I'm good, guys. I'm good.
I know in as much as we're going to talk about strategic planning, let's begin from matters of importance. Land in Kigali, in Rwanda, is very, very expensive. Lately, when I am talking to people who are interesting me to buy property, I remember the 20 years ago when we had an opportunity to buy 200,000, 400,000, in nearby places here. Kichuchi
Did you
Road,
have that money? That's the
Gisozi.
question.
Even if I had it, it was to eat.
Life was good. You blew it.
But today, you think of, I think I was somewhere in Kabeza, where they showed me a property that was going for about 70 million. Kichuchiro, 120 million. Just a small piece of land like this. And I started to wonder, compared to other places in Africa, why is land in Kigali pretty much very expensive? Now, I'll coin that with property. To buy a house, very expensive. Houses are too pricey, let alone buying. To rent a house,
Renting is an
I've been on a
excuse.
search for a 3-bedroom. It's like a standard now. If it is 3 bedrooms, it begins at 600,000, nothing less. Now I've also seen petrol stations are starting to close. Maybe it's because the rent is high.
And so people are staying at home more to maximize the rent money. I don't know.
People are walking
Can
to
you
the
imagine
drive.
if you rent a
The
home?
money's finished on the rent. You can't afford fuel.
You rent a home which you only enter at 11 p.m. and leave at 5 a.m.
I know. It's weird.
At that price,
It's crazy.
no compound, no green.
Yeah, I was waiting.
Squeezed in steel and cement.
I was waiting for you to give the prices in dollars. I wanted to see if
We're not going to price these things.
No, I was waiting to see if he knows what the problem might even be.
By the way, speaking of that, during the press conference, the presidential press conference, there was one journalist who asked the president about that dollar thing. Like, why are landlords making people pay rent in dollars?
You know that
It's because the diasporas are the ones who are.
that's actually the Sunday after I was with some people, and what I love about people is that we like to be outraged over other people's problems, even if it doesn't concern us. And I don't say that necessarily that we shouldn't be concerned for other people's issues. Like, there's some global issues where you look and you're like, but sometimes you don't have the context of the problem to really complain about it. Why? So I asked these people, I'm like, so they were like, yeah, these things of dollars, we should not accept dollars. Dollars, it's a problem. Then I asked the person, I'm like, okay, so how many years have you stayed in Rwanda? Okay, there were two people. So the first person, I'm like, since you have ever been around. When have you ever paid for anything in dollars? No, but rent. They charge people in rent, landlords. I'm like, okay, has your landlord ever charged you in dollars? No. And then I asked the other person, you've been in Rwanda 10 years. Have you ever paid in dollars or been charged in dollars? No.
So what were they ranting about?
My point exactly. And so when you even look at it, like very few people do get charged. When you do find people being charged in dollars, it's normally based on the fact that they're an international client. And that international client is, again, entering the country. The unit of measure for them is in dollars, so they can understand whether they're getting value for money. If you tell them it's $1,000, you may not necessarily require them to pay in dollars, but the billing is done in dollars for better understanding. So that is also one element of it that I think completely gets lost in that conversation. Not that I'm somebody who charges in dollars, but I'm just trying to say I think there are always two sides to any story. And so that's for me the other side. Now, coming back to this point of property being expensive, can I just tell you for a fact that this is not just a Rwandan issue. It's a global issue, and it moves with economies. Housing prices will always go up in economies where you have a burgeoning middle class, and then two, when you have a large, I don't know how to say this in the right way, but you have an influx of people in the seasonal manner, right? Which comes from being a tourist hub. What ends up happening is landlords tend to go the route of Airbnbs. I was having a conversation with someone earlier, and I said, a place that you would probably collect $500 in rent, which is like 600, 700K, that same place you can charge $50 per day, and you can get that same amount of money in only 10 days of clients being in the space. And so that's why the prices are going up.
True, and I think most landlords are opting for Airbnb
Yeah.
instead of like really rentals.
Yeah, it's less of a headache, and the client has probably paid up front, versus dealing with a client who's in your house. Then they get to a point where they can't pay, then you have to chase them. And the way our laws are set up, tenants have greater rights than landlords, even though people don't know that. And so when it comes to enforcing a contract, it's hard for a landlord to do so. So a lot of landlords are staying away from these long-term contracts, 600K, 700K, even though people are complaining. So what's happening is that demand is increasing and supply is actually decreasing.
But what is pushing this demand? Is it the number of people who've come into the country who want to work here, those who the immigration has given the right to actually become nationals?
No.
Where is this demand coming from?
So you see that now, I grew up in Botswana, and that rhetoric is actually very dangerous. So Botswana and most Southern African countries are very xenophobic, because that's the rhetoric that's pushed, that the country's issues are caused by an influx of foreigners. It's not actually the case. Let me tell you what's currently happening. So you're a home, and you're a father and then a mother, and you have 4 kids. You're 6 of you, and then you send those kids to school. All of them go abroad, and of the 4 kids, 3 of them come back in the span of 2 years, and none of them wants to stay home.
Yeah.
They all want to go and stay by themselves. So automatically you find that every household, the demand from one household is now times 4. And so you realize that if you're just to do it based on those numbers, just that simple mathematical calculation, demand in Kigali is going to obviously skyrocket. And unfortunately, developers are not keeping up with demand, because a lot of the development that's currently happening is still focusing on the tourism sector, which is now high-end apartments for short stay clients. But again, the trend will shift. Look at what happened to Nairobi. Nairobi, at some point, they realized the only place to go was up. You can't be building property on an acre of land.
Dust.
Yeah, exactly. You can't build etage, and especially etage. Let me give you a simple context, right? Most people who go the route of building etage tend to start building. They tend to do that in their 40s, and they complete it. Most people who do that have been married at that juncture in their 40s, let's say 45, have been married for about 18 years. So their first kid is about to leave the house. Now, if let's say that the age gap between the first kid and the last kid is 7 years, they are only going to live in that etage with children for 7 years. What ends up happening is all those kids leave, and it now becomes an empty nest. And that empty nest, you have two parents with extra room. So what ends up happening is that they invite relatives from up country. They take on their relatives' children, their siblings' children, just so that they can fill up that space. So for me, what I tell people whenever I have this conversation, I try to tell guys, I'm like, look, if you're going to go the route of building something, don't think about building it for now and showing people that you live in a big house etage in Chiwagawag. Look at it more in a practical sense and say, what's the stage of my family at this juncture? Where are they going to be in 5 years? What does that mean for my pocket? Where are the trends financially going? You'll find that the amount of money you would have spent building that etage, you could have probably gotten yourself 2 houses. You have one house for you and your young family and another house that you're renting out. And what ends up happening is that it alleviates the pressure on you personally when it comes to now the cost. Because I know there are guys who have mortgages and both husband and wife earn an income, but then they want to take their children to good schools. I mean, keeping up with the magicians. So they take their children, they try to take them to good schools. They try to drive
Up with the what?
magicians. Instead of the Joneses or the Kardashians, we have the magicians. So it's just as an expression, but you have a situation where people are trying to keep up with appearances. They want to drive a very good car. And all of those things have implications on your quality of life. Because
I was reading a story of Spain. I think what they have done in Spain in the real estate space, the leadership there has chosen if a house is going to cost $100,000 for a national, when you are a foreigner, it would cost you twice the price, because you're trying to limit the number of foreigners owning property in Spain. It also gets me thinking, if it is us who are having children, Rwandans having children who are going out to work and then they want space, is it our parents who are trying to charge us way too much, or do we have other landlords who are trying to make the most out of the situation?
So this conversation is much more complex than just saying it's that or it's that or it's something else. It's a combination of so many factors. I'll give you one simple factor, right? When you have, in this context, you're talking about foreign ownership of assets, right? When you have foreign ownership of assets, it means there's also a foreign inflow of capital. And where there's a foreign inflow of capital, it means that there's economic development that improves the quality, the standard of living of the citizens. So that becomes a benefit of something like that. So in every society, there's going to be trade-offs, right? And so to what extent does the cost of living affect, the foreign aspect of such a thing affect the cost of living? I don't think it's cut and dry to say it's black and white. I think for me, the 2 cents I would put towards that is to say that when we look at property right now, it's on the developers to break the status quo. And here's the funny part about it. The developers who can break the status quo are actually people who are not part of the existing system, in the sense that you are looking at foreign developers who look at the market and are like, we can do this different. I'll give you one simple example. There's a particular client of mine who wanted to do set up apartments, a very big development, and they wanted to do a feasibility study. And they paid a lot of money just to know whether they should, first and foremost, whether they should do it the way they think, and if not, what way can they do it. And just that information alone informed them that it's better to do it one way versus another. And in that sense, he then takes a different approach than what's already in the market, because he's trying to be competitive. And the same thing applies with even the developers that are probably listening to this. Think outside the box. I was told something yesterday. There's an opportunity under this Jiriwa Way project for BRD campaign. There are apartments somewhere you pay 4 million francs down, and every month for 10 years you pay 250K.
So
for
when
10 years.
Yeah.
I actually got to encounter very many developers, real estate developers, the other time of the expo, and I realized there are actually people who are doing cheaper
Yeah,
houses,
yeah.
affordable houses for everyone.
Are those
middle
houses in
class.
Kigali or
Yes,
with
they are in
Yeah.
Kigali.
Yeah, in Musanze?
They are in
No,
Kigali.
they are
Musanze
in
should be
Kigali.
even pretty much more expensive, right?
Yeah, I would assume so. Yeah.
I mean, Musanze is expensive, definitely.
Yeah.
It's a different story
It's
altogether.
a party district.
Yeah, but I also got to know that you actually the kind of apartments they are doing for people are people in the middle class, young people who are fresh graduates who can actually afford a loan from the bank and a mortgage that can
Yeah.
push for the next 20 to 15 years. They're there.
And actually,
So-
we need to start normalizing that when people get married, they stay in apartments. We need to normalize.
It's very
that.
normal to stay in an apartment. I don't know.
We
why
need to
people don't
normalize
find
it. I see it starting to become somehow normal, but we need to normalize it because right now, when young people get married, they want to inzu if it the whole
Katast-
If they,
Yeah,
if
as
they-
it should
na
be.
parking imodoka
Imodoka
hafi
itatu.
n'icumi.
Ahantu
Itatu
umwana
gusa.
ashinira. Isaac
Ako
told
say
us
for
here.
what?
Isaac told us here he had to leave Kibagabaga and went out of town because he was expecting a second baby. Said I needed space where my children can play and breathe.
But there's places to take them to go run.
But you guys, for us, I don't know why people find it so hard. We grew up in apartments. If you grew up in the flats, then you
No,
it's
honestly,
very normal. For
honestly,
me, I
like
didn't find
honestly,
it
that's what
normal.
I'm saying. Like if you really truly sit down and you're like, I'm gonna plan it. I'm gonna plan it out, which is now the conversation of strategic planning. I'm gonna plan it out. You realize that you can say, okay, we get married for the first year while we look for a place to build our own home. We're gonna be in an apartment. And apartments range from 400k, some you can get 350, some 300, up to 500 and 600 if you're looking for an expensive one.
Okay,
People want to live a luxury life.
Chatan.
Luxury.
Which
It's not that-
Rwandans have this money? Like you make 800,000, then live in a house of 600,000.
I mean, if
What
you have
is
joint
that?
income, if you
Because
have
you're
joint
now,
income,
you're two people.
that's what I'm saying. If you have joint income, in theory, you're paying 300.
Also, if you want to raise children with long hair, you don't have to pay too much in rent and stay in an apartment, which is pretty much expensive. If you want to raise kids who have long nails and long hair, you need to save money where they can have some eggs at home.
You mean for us who grew up in apartments, we don't have long nails?
Yeah, don't you see?
Is that what he's trying
That's
to
what
say?
he's trying to say.
I have long
Yeah,
nails, natural long nails.
Are they really that
grew up
long?
in the
They are
flats.
on the.
What's wrong with
Look
that?
at this one. No,
But I
seriously,
mean,
yeah.
I think to the modern world, and to live a very simple life, not to over carry. I mean, give yourself a lot of load. Just live in an apartment. There's nothing wrong.
Yeah,
with that.
so for me, like I said, I gave you this example. Imagine someone tells you, look for 4 million, put it down, and then for 10 years, you're going to be servicing 250k a month. 250k if you're earning 800k to own your own home makes sense.
A lot of it.
Yeah. So I don't want people to looking for properties to stay in one when you're under pressure or rushing. Our commissioner will obviously give you
Those ones are stress factors.
expensive things. Number two, normally the best way to find properties through your personal network of connections, friends and what. Say, I'm looking for a place. If you hear of anything, please let me know. Most of the time, you normally get good deals out of that. The third thing I would say is that don't go on Instagram. There are these
And TikTok.
And announce what you're looking for.
No, the announcing is not the issue. It's when you go on these pages of these influencers.
And you see the life they're living.
No, not even the life they're living. You don't know these property influencers.
Oh, yeah.
I called one of them an influencer, and people almost
They're
took off my head. But
realtors,
he genuinely
right?
is. Yeah, these guys create, and their content is. There's a reason why they put it on social media, and there's a reason why it's in English. It's because they're targeting diaspora in the Rwanda
So
who
we
stay
are not-
in Canada and the US.
You just know you're not the target market.
Exactly. When someone says a house only $89,000, my nigga, only. I'm like, you go slow. But to someone abroad, $89,000 is very affordable. They're like, I can actually afford a house in Kigali for $89,000. And so for me, I'm like, don't just know where you you are
Let
and
us
figure out
live where
these-
we are supposed to live in our levels. We are here stressed about rent. You're stressed about John Legend tickets. We are stressed about so many
No,
things.
John,
So-
John Legend tickets. Now they've brought these ones of,
No, let's just
of
not
Maverick City. So
Maverick
now you
City
are
is
like,
coming.
I choose between my faith and John Legend. No, but seriously, it's
That's crazy.
yeah.
Now it's 8 minutes to 9 o'clock.
Living Entrepreneurship by Salty.
With Ephraim Ramwenge, who is a consultant this morning. Ephraim, last week we looked at what it is, strategic planning, and I think you gave us a hint. It is the longer term game than the operational, strategies, the nitty gritties. But today, we just want to get a little deeper into this subject matter. And I wanted to start off with this question on, while you're doing strategic planning, how are you able to identify priorities? Especially, I want you to speak into the context of where we are as a market. You know better.
So let me take from my own personal story. So end of year was a bit hectic, so I didn't get a chance to really plan my year ahead. And I think I've said this before on this show and many times, that for me, I tend to look at, I don't plan for the year of necessarily goals, but I normally look at it from I have an overall plan for 10 years, 5 years. Then the milestones I have what are the milestones for this year to show that I'm progressing towards my overall goal. So just look at it almost as a savings account. So you like, in 10 years, I want to save 100 million. And so you're
In
like,
10 years.
I'm just saying as an example, right?
That's possible.
Yeah, I mean, if you're practical about it, and then you're like, if without earning any interest to adjust for inflation, right? Let's just say it's on a straight line balance and it's accumulating. You're like, on average, I need to save 10 million francs a year. So that means for the year, you're like, how do I get this 10 million? I don't know if you've heard what I just did.
In
the
one year.
the language I used. I said you have your 100 million for 10 years. That means on average,
10 million.
You need
per
10
year.
million. Then the question you ask yourself is, how can I get that 10 million for 2025? How? How is about methodology. It's about the way you're going to do that. And so that's, now when we talk of these aspects of priorities is tied to, when you look at the methodology, you now need to determine what's important in that aspect. Because again, you may want to go to Maverick City, to CLA for Joe Barnes, and you may also want to go to John Legend, but you only have 20K, and you need to budget which one matters most to you, based on what's available in terms of the resources. And so you have to end up prioritizing what matters to you. So there's a saying I love so much that says that values, I actually read it this morning, and shout out to the person who sent it to me. She knows herself. It says that we are driven by priorities but pulled by values. We're driven by priorities and we are pulled by values.
That's
so,
quite deep.
Yeah, it really is. So we are driven by the things we need to get done. We're driven by these quote unquote goals, but what we consider important will eventually rule the day. And so what I normally try to, in this context, I'll try to tell anybody who's listening to us, and we're pressed for time, so I can't get into the details, but first and foremost, you need to determine who you are. Your success is directly tied to your identity. And I think it sounds like, again, motivational speak. And I think I've said this again. It was not even 2 weeks ago. I'm like, who you think you are will determine what you consider important to you. I'll give you one example. My barber, who I've been with for 12 years. 12. Actually, it's going to be 13 years.
Such a
this year.
committed guy.
Thank you.
Committed, loyal.
Thank you
Very
so
loyal.
much. Thank you so much. 13 years. And wherever he moves, I go with him. So when I started with him, he was at a place where I was paying only 1,000. So 1,000, as I started to get money, I'm like, I need to give this guy. So I'll top up and give him a tip. And it would come to a total of 2,500. So everywhere he would shift, so he shifted to another place where it was 500 francs. So I would top up 2K as the tip, but I would maintain that 2,500. Recently, he shifted, maybe 4 months ago, he shifted to a place where
5K.
my G,
10K.
5K is polite, 10K, 10, and I'm like, and because he's your guy, and I'm telling you, this is someone I even gave him money to go get his driver's license. Like, I consider him a friend beyond him shaving my head. So when he gets such a position, he goes to a place where he's getting 10K. I'm happy for him, because I'm like, it's good for his growth as an individual. He has a family, he has some kids, and he has a wife and kids. But then on the flip side, I'm like, I got 10K. Then somebody put into perspective for me. Again, shout out to the person who put it in perspective for me. She knows herself. She's like, how much you pay for a haircut will determine who you think you are. And you see, she didn't say what people will think about you, because no one knows that this haircut was 10K, or this haircut was 5K, or this haircut was 2,500 or 1K or 500. She says it's about who you think you are. Do you think you're someone who can, because in essence, I shave maybe maximum 3 times a month. That's 30K in the month. That's 360K in the year for self-care. It's about my appearance and how I present myself professionally in whatever I do. It also helps me determine whether, because also, like, for example, hygiene is a personal thing. How you take care of yourself, how you clean yourself, that also reflects on who you think you are. And so she said that, and I'm like, really, do I?
But also compared to the money that you make in the 360 days, and that's 360,000. Honestly speaking, on self-care now, I think it's worth it.
Exactly my point. And so the same thing, just is looking at me like he wants to beat me. I have not gone to his salon because he was charging me 5K.
Now they're charging you 10K.
Now they're charging me times 2.
Finally, I'm a good guy.
Now just
He's loyal, remember?
No, so my point is, because I'm pressed for time, but just in essence, if you go and sit down and you're gonna come up with the methodology of how you get to that 10 million for your strategic plan for the year. First and foremost, you need to understand what's important to you, what matters to you, what are your values, who are you as a person, and that will now help you ensure that you follow through with action, which is what we'll talk about next week. But because a lot of people will set these goals and things for the year and they will never achieve them. Guys start in the gym, they only do it 1 month and they stop somewhere. But if you ask yourself, am I a healthy person? Then if you're a healthy person, what are the habits of a healthy person? A healthy person goes to the gym and is consistent with it. And all you do is just focusing on being a healthy person every day. You wake up in the morning. What am I? I'm a healthy person. What does a healthy person do? They go to the gym. I'm going to go to the gym. And you do that day in, day out. You do it for yourself, your personal well-being, mental and physical. You do it for your professional career. You do it for your development in terms of your education and your relationships, and you'll see how far you'll go.
In a minute, because we have to close this, Isa is ready to bring us the news. How do you ensure that strategic plans are not just theoretical but are effectively implemented and monitored over time?
That's it. So you incorporate habits into them. So like I said, there's the identity aspect, which is part 1. And by the way, this is the same thing with a business. That's why in a business, they'll tell you mission and vision. Mission and vision is literally an identity statement for a company. What are we about? What do we want to achieve? Where do we see ourselves in 10 years?
The heartbeat of Kigali.
Good
vibes on vibes.
Exactly.
Happy people station.
Exactly. So now you have, I like that. So you have, it's your radio. You can advertise yourself for free. Yeah, I know. Royal FM 94.3. So anyway, so once you know your identity as a person, the next thing is the habits. So now the habits now come down to now an implementation plan. What do we do on a daily basis? Now these are the KPIs, the critical success factors, all of these intricate details. Now on a personal level, what does that look like? Again, habits. Once I know I'm a healthy person, I now define what does a healthy person do. to be called a healthy person? What does, if I'm a consistent individual in terms of my work, a reliable employee, what does a reliable employee look like? What are those habits? They show up on time, they deliver the work on time, they follow through on what they've committed to do, and they go above and beyond. And they are a productive member of the environment. So they're not just a performer, but they're also a good team member. So they know how to work well with people. They're not involved in the politicking of the office, or at least they're playing towards the positive aspect of seeing the company move forward. Now, once you take on that identity and you apply those habits, you'll be surprised how consistent and how effective you become.
It's Ephraim Ramwenge here this morning. It's Living Entrepreneurship by Salty. You can find this as well on our YouTube channel. These conversations every Tuesday from 8:30 to 9 o'clock. We're short of time, but again, we'll be here next week to bring to you this continuing series of strategic planning with Ephraim. Time for news coming up next.
Living Entrepreneurship